I managed to collect 200 unusual historical photos that you might have missed. Write in the comments which photo you liked the most. On May 23, 1944, an American soldier guards German prisoners captured during the brutal Allied campaign in Italy. One prisoner has a bandaged eye, while the smiling guard keeps his weapon ready as a military truck races past. On August 2, 1943, a German anti-aircraft shell tore open the nose of the Martin B-26 Marauder Miss Emily during a raid on Merville. The navigator had left his seat moments before it was destroyed, while armor plating saved the pilot from the blast. The son of a cotton sharecropper works in a Mississippi field in 1935. Sharecropping often trapped families in debt, forcing even young children to help pick cotton instead of attending school. Priscilla Bejarano was born with unusual hair growth and extra teeth, yet became a famous sideshow performer, actress, and outspoken defender of people with physical differences. She met fellow performer Emmett Bejarano in the circus, married him for nearly 60 years, and later toured with their son Tony. Bernard Coble photographed Stella Grassman in 1931, revealing tattoos that covered nearly her entire body. Most were created by her husband, Samuel Deafy Grassman, a master tattoo artist. Alexander Graham Bell leans in to kiss his wife Mabel as she stands inside one of his giant tetrahedral kites. Bell built these geometric flying machines while searching for a design strong enough to carry people into the sky. This rare photograph shows a costume party inside Magnus Hirschfeld's Institute for Sexual Research in Berlin. Hirschfeld, identified by his glasses, holds hands with his partner Karl Giese, years before the Nazis destroyed the institute and burned its pioneering archive. Hungarian police officers practiced pistol shooting in Budapest in 1967 while wearing full gas masks. The masks were part of training for firing accurately during tear gas attacks or chemical emergencies. Columbine High School's class of 1999 posed for this photo just 2 weeks before the massacre. On April 20th, 2 students murdered 12 classmates and 1 teacher, turning this ordinary school portrait into a haunting record of life before the attack. This is one of the last photographs of Billie Holiday, taken shortly before her death in 1959. After years of persecution by federal narcotics agents, she was arrested in her hospital bed while dying from liver disease at only 44. In Kandahar province in 1988, Afghan Baluch villagers offered water to a Soviet soldier during the final years of the Soviet-Afghan War. The simple exchange captured rare human contact in a conflict that killed or displaced millions. Humphrey Bogart wore wooden platforms strapped to his shoes while filming Casablanca. At about 5 feet 8 inches, he was shorter than Ingrid Bergman, so this hidden Hollywood trick made him appear taller beside her on camera. In 1975, Morocco sent about 350,000 civilians into Western Sahara during the Green March as Spain prepared to leave the territory. The march helped Morocco claim control, triggering war, mass displacement, and a conflict that remains unresolved today. Arctic Ocean, 1909. Robert Peary claimed he had become the first person to reach the North Pole, though his achievement remains disputed. His ship, the Roosevelt, was trapped in pack ice near Cape Sheridan, serving as the frozen base for one of history's most controversial expeditions. On August 19, 1980, Saudia Flight 163 landed safely in Riyadh after a fire broke out in its cargo hold. The crew never began an evacuation, and all 301 people on board died from smoke inhalation while the aircraft sat on the runway. This wrist-mounted knife was known as the Srbosjek, meaning Serb cutter. Ustaše guards used blades like this at the Jasenovac concentration camp to murder Serbs, Jews, Roma, and political prisoners during the Second World War. During the Spanish flu of 1918, telephone operators wore gauze masks while keeping vital calls connected. These masks were widely required in some American cities, but their loose fabric offered far less protection than modern medical masks. This rare photograph from 1976 shows Ozzy Osbourne's first wife, Thelma Riley, with Jessica, Louis, and Elliot, whom Ozzie adopted. Their troubled marriage ended in 1982, and Ozzie later admitted that years of addiction made him an absent father. On May 2, 1982, the British nuclear submarine HMS Conqueror torpedoed the Argentine cruiser General Belgrano, killing 323 sailors. It remains the only warship ever sunk in combat by a nuclear-powered submarine, and the attack caused nearly half of Argentina's deaths in the Falklands War. Sarah Rector was only 10 when oil was discovered beneath the unwanted Oklahoma land, allotted to her as a Creek freedman descendant. Her fortune made her a millionaire, and newspapers falsely claimed the state had declared her white so she could receive privileges denied to black Americans. This is Robert Prevost in 1982, the year he became a priest in Rome at age 26. 43 years later, he became Pope Leo XIV, the first American pope in history. On August 3, 1936, Jesse Owens won the 100-meter Olympic gold medal in Nazi Berlin. Owens later said Adolf Hitler had not snubbed him, but President Franklin Roosevelt had, never inviting him to the White House or sending congratulations. Born enslaved and conjoined in North Carolina in 1851, Millie and Christine McCoy were repeatedly kidnapped and exploited as children. After gaining freedom, they took control of their performances, earned a fortune, bought a family estate, and funded a school for black children. These exhausted Polish soldiers had just helped seal the Falaise Pocket in August 1944, trapping tens of thousands of German troops. General Stanisław Maciek's division held the vital escape route at Montormel against repeated attacks, despite running dangerously low on ammunition. Chinese police struggled to contain pro-democracy students marching through Tiananmen Square in 1989. The march marked 70 years since the May 4th movement, while the new protests grew into a national crisis that ended in a deadly military crackdown. During the Warsaw Uprising in 1944, civilians ran under fire to collect water after the city's supply system collapsed. Jerzy Bieger captured this dangerous journey beside a barricade at the corner of Krucha Street and Piusa Street. A protester condemns President Ronald Reagan's visit to Bitburg Cemetery in West Germany on May 5, 1985. The cemetery held the graves of 49 Waffen-SS soldiers, turning the ceremony into an international scandal. 2 Palestinian boys carried Palestinian and American flags during Bill Clinton's visit to Gaza in 1998. The new Gaza International Airport was hailed as a symbol of independence, but Israeli forces destroyed its runway just 3 years later. On January 1, 1988, a Soviet family watched Ronald Reagan deliver an unprecedented New Year message on state television. Mikhail Gorbachev addressed Americans in return, just weeks after both leaders signed the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty and began dismantling an entire class of nuclear missiles. On August 2, 1944, German submarine U-804 torpedoed the United States Navy destroyer Escort, Fisk, north of the Azores. The blast broke the ship in two within 10 minutes, killing 33 sailors, while both halves sank separately. This American-built M47 Patton once served Somalia's National Army before being destroyed in Mogadishu during the Civil War in December 1992. Photojournalist Peter Turnley captured the bizarre wreck with a crushed car body resting on top of the tank. Antonio de Oliveira Salazar ruled Portugal without military experience, rising from an economics professor to dictator. He suppressed political life, rejected fascism as pagan Caesarism, and helped keep neighboring Spain out of the Second World War. In 1973, exiled Prince Norodom Sihanouk secretly entered rebel-held Cambodia through the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Beside him stood Khmer Rouge leaders who seized power 2 years later and turned Cambodia into a killing ground. A German cavalryman watches an early airplane fly over Johannisthal Airfield near Berlin on August 12, 1910. Johannisthal had opened only 1 year earlier and became Germany's first major airfield. McDonald's Japan founder Den Fujita poses with employees in 1986. He once claimed that eating hamburgers for 1,000 years would give Japanese people blonde hair and white skin. On August 1, 1944, the Polish resistance launched the Warsaw Uprising against German occupation. German forces killed up to 200,000 people, most of them civilians, expelled about 650,000 residents, and systematically destroyed most of the city. Two boys race homemade scooters built from scrap wood and roller skate wheels on a London street in 1954. Thurston Hopkins took the photo for a picture post feature showing how working-class children created their own toys when factory-made ones were too expensive. On June 29, 1994, Japan's parliament chose socialist leader Tomichi Murayama as prime minister, ending nearly 50 years without a socialist in the post. His victory was a political shock because it depended on an unlikely coalition with the conservative Liberal Democratic Party. This 1945 photograph shows Burton Christensen, an Easy Company paratrooper who survived Normandy, Holland, Bastogne, and Germany before returning to his telephone company job. For nearly 40 years, he secretly reconstructed the war in 46 detailed drawings that Stephen Ambrose later called almost priceless. On November 15, 1944, Navy pilot Bob Elder landed this tailhook-equipped P-51D Mustang on the USS Shangri-La. The trials succeeded, but poor low-speed control and the lack of folding wings kept the Mustang out of naval service. James Dean washes the Porsche 356 Super Speedster he bought in February 1955 for daily driving. Months later, he traded it for the Porsche 550 Spider that became forever linked to his fatal crash. This single-seat Breda BA-65 Nibio was photographed over Lombardy in 1939. Built for ground attacks, it carried bombs and heavy guns, but proved dangerously vulnerable to faster fighters. In 1952, tuberculosis patients at Seaview Hospital stunned the world by dancing in the halls after isoniazid rapidly restored their strength. The trials were supported by the Black Angels, black nurses who risked their lives caring for patients when many others refused. In 1962, 18-year-old Michael Douglas danced with 16-year-old Haley Mills at his birthday party. Mills was already a Disney star and Academy Award winner, while Douglas was still years away from becoming one of Hollywood's biggest actors. Around New Year's Day in 1864, famous actor Edwin Booth saved Robert Lincoln from an oncoming train by grabbing his collar. 1 year later, Edwin's brother, John Wilkes Booth, assassinated Robert's father, President Abraham Lincoln. James Stewart became the first major Hollywood star to enlist for World War II, then commanded B-24 Liberator bombers over Nazi-occupied Europe. He flew 20 official combat missions and later rose to brigadier general. Nikita Khrushchev inspects wheat in Kazakhstan in 1964 after his Virgin Lands campaign had turned millions of acres into farmland. Months later, his closest allies removed him from power after poor harvests, food shortages, and years of failed policies. A woman mourns beside the coffins of Jewish victims of the Kielce pogrom in Poland in 1946. 38 to 42 Holocaust survivors were murdered by police officers, soldiers, and civilians after a false accusation sparked brutal violence. On August 2, 1990, Saddam Hussein sent Iraqi forces into Kuwait, seizing the country within 2 days and later declaring it part of Iraq. The invasion triggered the Gulf War, brought permanent United States military bases to the Gulf, and began decades of conflict with Iraq. Laika became the first animal to orbit Earth aboard Sputnik 2 on November 3, 1957. The Soviet Union had no plan to bring her home, and she died within hours when the capsule overheated. Rocky Marciano became world heavyweight champion in 1952 by knocking out Jersey Joe Walcott in the 13th round. He retired with 49 wins and 0 losses, the only heavyweight champion to end his career undefeated. On October 1, 1941, people sorted victims' belongings at Babi Yar, 2 days after German forces murdered more than 33,000 Kyiv Jews there. Wehrmacht driver Hofer testified that families were stripped, forced into the ravine, laid on rows of bodies, and shot in the back of the head. This rare color photograph shows a Savoia Marchetti SM-79 Sparviero, Italy's fast 3-engined bomber, marked 252 for the 252nd Squadron. Its distinctive hump housed a machine gun position, earning the aircraft its feared nickname, the Hunchback. British Princess Alice, Countess of Athlone, appears in a rare photograph wearing a traditional Arab bisht. Her Mawasama cloak was made from sheep's wool and decorated with zari buttons and braided cords that framed her head and shoulders. On August 2, 1926, Marjorie Joesting posed for this portrait as Miss Washington, D.C. That year, she competed for the Miss America crown in Atlantic City and finished as a runner-up before later becoming Mrs. Arthur Lang. In 1959, a mother and child marched outside the Arkansas state capitol carrying signs that defended segregation and Governor Orville Faubus. 2 years earlier, Faubus had used armed National Guard troops to block 9 black students from entering Little Rock Central High School. At this health farm, a male employee measures a woman's body fat with calipers during her strict weight loss program. Guests followed controlled diets and regular measurements, turning every inch of progress into a recorded result. These men turned a hospital bed into a poker table while visiting their sick friend. Even the patient is smoking, a shocking reminder that cigarettes were once common inside hospitals. In 1952, these children with polio lay inside iron lungs, sealed machines that kept them breathing when paralysis stopped their chest muscles from working. Their family watched through a window as the machines breathed for them, just before Jonas Salk developed the vaccine that would transform the fight against polio. In early 1950, children at an English village school practiced wearing gas masks because a poison gas dump was located nearby. Just 5 years after World War II, even an ordinary classroom drill carried the fear of another chemical attack. In France in 1950, a judge inspected women's legs while the contestants' faces and bodies remained hidden behind a curtain. The bizarre contest reduced beauty to a single body part, with the winner chosen only for having the most attractive pair of legs. This worker stood between 2 white-only signs at a fireworks store during segregation in the 1950s. Such signs openly barred Black Americans from entrances, jobs, and services, turning everyday shopping into a system of racial control. In 1951, a nurse prepares a patient with severe depression for electroconvulsive therapy, positioning electrodes while staff hold him still. Early treatments used stronger electrical currents and often lacked modern anesthesia and muscle relaxants, making the procedure far more dangerous. This photograph shows 22-year-old Gloria June Weisbrod moments after her arrest on July 22, 1953. She was accused of performing an illegal abortion on her cousin, who died after the procedure. In 1958, this woman was photographed entering a hidden abortion clinic in a London back street. Abortion was still illegal in Britain for most women, forcing many to risk prison, injury, or death before the law changed in 1967. This 1953 photo shows Princess Lillian of Belgium driving a convertible with her young daughter, Marie-Christine, beside her. Lillian was King Leopold III's controversial second wife, but she was never given the title of queen. This rare 1950 photograph shows a vast Pentagon office where rows of male clerks processed mountains of paperwork without computers. The Pentagon had opened just 7 years earlier and was the largest office building in the world. Yet not a single woman appears in this room. At a London Girls and Legs show, this performer balanced barefoot on hundreds of sharp nails while posing for a male audience. The tightly packed nails spread her weight across many points, but one wrong shift could still tear her skin. At first, this looks like a sweet moment between a father and his young daughter. Then you notice the unlit cigarette in her mouth, a shocking detail that reveals how casually smoking was once treated around children. This child is leaving a segregated cafe through the door marked "Colored," while white customers used a separate entrance. Under Jim Crow laws, even buying a meal meant being publicly divided by race. These workers handled asbestos with no masks in the 1950s, when its deadly dust was often treated as harmless. The invisible fibers could stay buried in their lungs for decades before causing asbestosis, lung cancer, or mesothelioma. In 1954, Hurricane Carol tore a house from its foundation and carried its roof several miles through the raging sea. 3 survivors clung to the wreckage until sailors from the United States Navy ship Blair pulled them to safety. In 1954, racist and anti-Semitic protesters marched outside the White House, demanding racial segregation and attacking Jewish Americans. Their signs blamed Jews for the civil rights movement and condemned the NAACP for fighting to end segregation. In 1954, cowgirls Jane Pike and Carolee Kelly sat on 100,000 silver dollars to promote Las Vegas gambling. The coins weighed nearly 6,000 pounds, and the women jingled them for 4 days. This looks like a woman relaxing, but she is actually lying on a vintage weight loss machine. The table vibrated her body and promised effortless fat loss, despite having little evidence that it worked. This woman is being sprayed by an infrared tanning machine as a curious boy watches. The treatment promised a fast, even tan, without the burns and risks of sunlight, but the bold safety claim was never proven. These rare candid photos reveal Marilyn Monroe swimming without her famous red lipstick, sculpted curls, or glamorous studio lighting. Long before celebrity photos were carefully controlled, they captured a relaxed, playful side of her that Hollywood rarely allowed the public to see. After the Titanic sank, 2 French brothers who spoke no English became famous worldwide as the unidentified Titanic orphans. Newspapers printed Michelle and Edmund Navratil's photograph, allowing their mother to recognize them and reunite with them 1 month later. In 1926, Gertrude Ederle became the first woman to swim across the English Channel. She finished in 14 hours and 34 minutes, beating the men's world record by nearly 2 hours. Before Hollywood fame, Patrick Swayze trained as a dancer under his mother, renowned choreographer Patsy Swayze. That early discipline later powered the unforgettable moves that made him a global star in Dirty Dancing. In 1944, Jewish partisan Faye Schulman was photographed near Pinsk after escaping the Nazis who murdered her family but spared her for her photography skills. She secretly documented more than 100 images of partisan life, developing negatives under blankets and hiding her camera during combat missions. A Victorian couple struggles not to laugh during a portrait session in the 1890s. Because cameras needed long exposures, even a small movement could ruin the photograph, making these playful images unusually candid for the era. In 1907, Mangayan dancers gathered in Rarotonga, wearing elaborate plant fiber costumes and carrying ceremonial weapons. Their performance preserved the war dances and traditions of Mangaya after decades of colonial rule and missionary influence. An American soldier rests in the rubble of Marigny, Normandy, on July 28, 1944. The town had been devastated during Operation Cobra, the massive Allied offensive that finally broke through German defenses and opened the road across France. Journey singer Steve Perry is pictured with his girlfriend Sherry Swafford in 1982. Their relationship later inspired his solo hit, Oh Sherry, and she appeared in its famous music video. In 1977, South African detective Andre Stander began robbing banks, sometimes during lunch, before returning to investigate his own crimes. After nearly 30 robberies, an arrest, and a prison escape, he resumed his crime spree until police killed him in Florida in 1984. Joe Namath poses with Susan Olsen and Maureen McCormick during his guest appearance on The Brady Bunch in 1973. In the episode, Bobby fakes a serious illness after claiming that the football legend is his close friend. A Titanic survivor signs an autograph in 1912, shortly after escaping one of history's deadliest maritime disasters. Survivors suddenly became public figures, and crowds searched for personal stories from the night. More than 1,500 people died. On August 3, 1976, dissidents Yuli Rybakov and Oleg Volkov painted a 42-meter warning across Leningrad's Peter and Paul Fortress. "You crucify freedom, but the human soul knows no shackles." 1 month later, 23-year-old KGB Lieutenant Vladimir Putin helped search Volkov's home. In 1965, former Iranian Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh sat in his garden 12 years after a CIA and British-backed coup removed him from power. He remained under house arrest until his death in 1967, punished after nationalizing Iran's British-controlled oil industry. On August 2, 1985, Delta Airlines Flight 191 flew into a powerful microburst near Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport and crashed short of the runway. The disaster killed 136 people aboard and a motorist whose car was struck by the aircraft. On August 2, 1941, Sergeant Yakov Kolchak was awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union. Weeks earlier, near Filyanovka, the artilleryman had destroyed 4 German tanks with his field gun during a 1-hour battle, firing from only 150 meters away. Paul Williams seemed to be everywhere in the 1970s, appearing on talk shows, variety programs, films, and award broadcasts. He also wrote major hits, including Evergreen, which won the Academy Award for Best Original Song in 1977. During the Falklands War, Argentine pilots flew dangerously low over the sea to evade British radar and attack the fleet. Sea Harriers won 21 air battles without a single air-to-air loss, but Argentine strikes still sank 6 British ships. Elvis Presley peers from a tank, while his father Vernon proudly takes the commander's seat at Ray Barracks in West Germany in 1959. At the height of his fame, Elvis refused special treatment and served alongside ordinary soldiers in the 3rd Armored Division. On September 8, 1863, a Confederate photographer captured Union ironclads firing in formation during the American Civil War. Moments later, shore batteries spotted him and opened fire, narrowly missing him and forcing him to abandon his position. In 1931, Jawaharlal Nehru posed with his wife Kamala and their 13-year-old daughter Indira, while the family fought British rule in India. Jawaharlal later became independent India's first prime minister, and Indira became the country's first female prime minister. In 1986, Soviet soldiers called biorobots had roughly 60 seconds to clear highly radioactive graphite from the roof beside Chernobyl Reactor 4. Robots failed in the extreme radiation, so thousands of men completed the deadly task by hand. Around 1952, stylist Sigrid Silter gives the photographer a confident look on a busy city street. Her crisp white collar, fitted sweater, wide belt, full skirt, and fur stole capture the polished style of the early 1950s. On August 3, 1914, Germany declared war on France after demanding a free path through neutral Belgium. The invasion brought Britain into the war the next day, turning a European crisis into a global conflict. At Chicago's Graham School between 1900 and 1915, a teacher and her students wore thick parkas and mittens because their classroom had no heat. Even indoors, the children had to write at their desks while dressed for freezing winter weather. Japanese soldiers prepared to charge in New Guinea in 1943, carrying bayonets and the rising sun flag. Disease and starvation became even deadlier than Allied fire, destroying Japanese units far from reliable food and medicine. On Valentine's Day in 1964, Elvis Presley donated his yacht to raise money for the newly opened St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. The yacht was later sold for up to $75,000, helping founder Danny Thomas fund life-saving cancer treatment for children. Three workers take a smoke break high above the water during construction of the Auckland Harbor Bridge in 1959. They sit on exposed steel with no visible safety harnesses just weeks before the bridge opened to traffic. A huge crowd packed Austin's Paramount Theater for the world premiere of Batman on July 30th, 1966. Adam West, Burt Ward, Cesar Romero, Lee Merriweather, and Burgess Meredith attended, bringing Batman, Robin, the Joker, Catwoman, and the Penguin together in real life. A French man reacts to the unfamiliar taste of Coca-Cola during the company's major campaign in France in 1950. Photographer Mark Kaufman captured the explosive moment as the drink sprayed from his mouth. The mayor of St. Pölten, Imperial Councillor Ebner, visits Austro-Hungarian riflemen in their trench and hands out cigarettes, then considered a valued military comfort. The soldier on the far right wears a striking cap badge, one of the unofficial symbols troops use to display unit identity and battlefield pride. This French family was photographed in real color in 1914 using autochrome, the revolutionary process invented by the Lumiere brothers. The same brothers who pioneered cinema created vivid color images years before most families even owned a camera. In the early 20th century, this French mailman delivered letters on stilts through the wet and sandy Pays de Bouc. The tall wooden legs helped him cross flooded ground faster while keeping the mail dry. Hundreds of school buses sat submerged in New Orleans on September 9, 2005, after Hurricane Katrina overwhelmed the city. The flooded fleet became a shocking symbol of the evacuation failures that left thousands of people stranded. 4 Soviet workers posed during an outing near Pavlovsk, outside Leningrad, in 1976. Their guitar, portable typewriter, and bags reveal a rare private side of Soviet life, far removed from official factory photographs. In 1953, Wilhelm Noll and Fritz Kron raced this BMW sidecar, with Kron hanging inches above the track to keep the machine balanced. Their teamwork helped BMW dominate sidecar racing and win the World Championship the following year. More than 60,000 people packed Brockton for Rocky Marciano's victory parade after he became heavyweight champion in 1952. He had taken the title by knocking out Jersey Joe Walcott with a devastating right hand in the 13th round. Katherine Johnson, known as a human computer, calculated the trajectory for Alan Shepard's historic flight in 1961. Her precise work helped make him the first American to travel into space. Buffalo Bill, born William Cody, visits El Paso in 1914 at about 68 years old. One family story claims an ancestor met the famous showman and dismissed him as a blowhard, meaning someone who boasted and talked nonsense. Bombardier Ewart Sconiers had failed pilot training, yet on August 21, 1942, he took control of a shattered B-17 after the co-pilot was killed and the pilot badly wounded. He landed safely in England, becoming the 8th Air Force's first B-17 war hero. In July 1945, Boeing B-29 Superfortresses from the 29th and 19th Bombardment Groups crowded North Field on Guam. These giant bombers used the island as a launch point for devastating raids against Japan, flying missions that could last more than 15 hours. In 1974, this newspaper featured a 21-year-old man posing beside the giant Abraham Lincoln snowman he had sculpted from memory. He hated the photo because reporters arrived after days of melting, then told him to pretend he was adding the finishing touches. Around 1947, Ted Kroner photographed acrobats rehearsing inside a circus tent, capturing the hidden work behind the spectacle. His slow shutter blurred the moving performer while the woman in front stayed sharp, turning a routine practice into a striking study of speed and control. United States Marines watch Iraqi civilians pass their position on March 31, 2003. The photo was taken just 12 days after the invasion began, as troops pushed deeper into Iraq and civilians moved through active combat zones. Nepalese students celebrate after the 1990 People's Movement forced King Birendra to to restore multi-party democracy. The uprising ended 30 years of absolute royal rule and transformed Nepal into a constitutional monarchy. On February 17, 1927, police arrested actress Texas Guinan and 3 associates inside her famous New York speakeasy. Known as the Queen of the Speakeasies, Guinan was charged with breaking prohibition laws at the 300 Club. In 1907, workers guided a massive log drive down the Hudson River from the Adirondack forests. They crossed the unstable timber with long pikes, risking crushing injuries as thousands of logs jammed together. This strange aircraft is the Bernelli UB-14, built in the 1930s with a wide body that also produced lift. Its unusual design carried more weight with less power, yet Bernelli spent decades fighting to make the aviation industry accept it. From 1860 to 1916, British soldiers were forbidden to shave their upper lips, making mustaches part of official military discipline. Breaking the rule could bring punishment, even imprisonment, until the order was finally abolished during the First World War. In 1894, notorious gunfighter John Wesley Hardin was pardoned after serving 15 years in a Texas prison for murder. After his release, the man accused of killing dozens passed the bar and became a lawyer. Charles B. Tripp was born without arms, yet became a skilled carpenter, photographer, and sideshow star who supported his mother and sister. In 1924, he was still famous for writing with his feet and campaigning to remove the word freak from advertisements. 5 Japanese warships await demolition at Sasebo, including the destroyers Yanagi, Hinoki, and Fuyuzuki, plus the escort ships Miyake and No. 132. Fuyuzuki survived the war but lost her stern to a mine on August 24, 1945. On March 16, 1968, American soldiers massacred 504 unarmed civilians in the Vietnamese village of My Lai, including women, children, and babies. Despite the scale of the killing and its attempted cover-up, only 1 soldier was convicted, and he served just 3 years under house arrest. In 1928, Emperor Hirohito wore ancient court robes for his enthronement, 2 years after taking the throne. His reign would span Japan's brutal expansion across Asia, defeat in World War II, and transformation into a modern democracy. This Yugoslav MiG-29 was photographed at Batajnica Air Base shortly after arriving from the Soviet Union in October 1987. It carried 3 missiles under one wing and became part of Yugoslavia's first group of advanced 4th-generation fighters. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Barker commanded Task Force Barker, the unit behind the My Lai massacre in 1968. 3 months later, he died in a helicopter collision before he could face charges. In 1934, this full orchestra was formed by orphans and poor children at Skarbek's charitable institution in Drohowicz, then Poland and now Ukraine. Their impressive collection of brass, woodwind, and percussion instruments turned a struggling orphanage into a remarkably disciplined musical ensemble. This giant tethered balloon carried visitors above Paris during the 1878 World's Fair. Built by Henry Gifford, it lifted up to 50 passengers at once, giving thousands of people their first view of a city from the sky. A bingo player watches several cards at St. Casimir Church in Baltimore, Maryland in 1979. Her dauber, cigarette, and crowded table capture a time when church bingo nights mixed fundraising, competition, and community life. Italian neurologist Ugo Cerletti got the idea for electroshock therapy after watching slaughterhouse workers stun pigs with electricity. He and Lucio Bini adapted the method for humans and performed the first electroconvulsive treatment on a psychiatric patient in 1938. In November 1989, crowds climbed the Berlin Wall after a confused official announced that East Germans could cross the border immediately. Within hours, people attacked the barrier with hammers, beginning the destruction of the Cold War's most infamous divide. In March 1941, the massive Bosch-Buster railway howitzer waited beside a Kent tunnel, ready to defend Britain from a German invasion. Despite its terrifying 18-inch barrel, it could not fire across the English Channel, and the famous name actually belonged to its First World War gun carriage. Workers clear wreckage from the Stony Creek River in downtown Johnstown after the flood of 1936. The disaster killed about 24 people, destroyed thousands of homes, and caused roughly $41 million in damage. Vladimir Komarov commanded the first spacecraft to carry 3 people and became the first cosmonaut to land inside his capsule. In 1967, Soyuz 1 crashed after its parachute lines tangled during descent, making him the first person to die on a space mission. This photograph shows Body, California, at the height of its gold boom in 1880, when thousands of people crowded into the remote mining town. Body had dozens of saloons and a deadly reputation, but its mines soon declined and most residents disappeared. H.R. Geiger adjusts the alien suit worn by Balaji Badejo, a 6'10" actor discovered in a London pub. Geiger's biomechanical design was so disturbing that it helped Alien win the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects in 1980. In 1939, a young Jewish woman in occupied Poland smiled at Hugo Jäger, one of Adolf Hitler's personal photographers. Her identity and fate remain unknown, but Nazi forces would soon imprison Poland's Jews in ghettos before deporting millions to killing centers. On May 8, 1942, the Mochida family waited in Hayward, California, to be imprisoned under President Roosevelt's order targeting people of Japanese ancestry. Their numbered tags identified them like luggage before they were sent to the Tanforan Detention Center. In 1959, this KLM flight attendant trained with an AR-10 rifle before flying over the Arctic. Crews carried weapons because a crash could leave them stranded far from rescue, surrounded by hungry polar bears. At the 1987 Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, a giant ice-skating Snoopy floated above Columbus Circle as thousands packed the streets below. The balloon stood 64 feet tall and required dozens of handlers to guide it safely between Manhattan's skyscrapers. In 1936, this migrant farm family followed seasonal harvests during the Great Depression, moving wherever work could be found. Their patched clothes and makeshift shelter reveal how entire families survived on low wages, while children often worked beside their parents. In 1926, workers excavating Egypt's ancient city of Memphis uncovered a colossal statue buried beneath centuries of soil. The sculpture depicted Pharaoh Ramesses II, who ruled more than 3,000 years ago. This is not the real storming of the Winter Palace in 1917, but a scene from Sergei Eisenstein's film October. The famous reenactment was far more dramatic than the actual takeover, which faced limited resistance and caused little fighting. In 1934, prisoner Lightnin' Washington led his work crew in song as they chopped wood at Darrington State Farm in Texas. Their axes struck in rhythm, while folklorists recorded "Good God Almighty," preserving a rare sound of forced prison labor. This 1993 photo was taken at Dual Vocational Institution in Tracy, California, a prison known as the Gladiator School. The nickname came from decades of brutal gang violence before the facility finally closed in 2021. This rare photograph shows the Chartist rally at Kennington Common in London on April 10, 1848. The crowd gathered to support a petition demanding voting rights, but Parliament rejected it after discovering fake signatures and far fewer names than claimed. Japanese American girls take a dance lesson at the Manzanar incarceration camp in California in 1942. Behind this ordinary scene, more than 110,000 people of Japanese ancestry were forcibly removed from their homes during the Second World War. On September 29, 1984, Western and Eastern crews met at Balbukta Station to lay the final rail section of the Baikal-Amur main line. This photograph captures the historic moment the two halves of the massive railway were finally joined. Polish-born Jewish journalist Israel Epstein came to China to report on the war against Japan, and this photograph shows him in 1944. He later became a Chinese citizen, joined the Communist Party, and received a funeral attended by President Hu Jintao after his death in 2005. Yuri Gagarin examines a hunting shotgun with his father, Alexei, in 1966. Before his son became the first human in space, Alexei worked as a carpenter on a collective farm. Two Honduran National Guard soldiers patrol a nearly empty street in central Tegucigalpa in 1963. That same year, the military overthrew President Ramon Villeda Morales and seized control just days before a scheduled election. Sailors hold a boxing match aboard the German ship Magdalene Winnen II in 1933. After Germany's defeat in 1945, the Soviet Union took the vessel as war reparations and renamed it Sedov. This is how General Electric displayed a room air conditioner in 1941, when home cooling was still a rare luxury. The bulky unit promised fresh filtered air, quieter rooms, lower humidity, and year-round comfort. In 1956, Frank Lloyd Wright visited Southdale Center, the first fully enclosed, climate-controlled shopping mall in the United States, just weeks after it opened. The legendary architect hated what he saw and called it a splendid place for a slave market. A military checkpoint stops drivers in Warsaw in 1982 during Poland's brutal crackdown on the Solidarity movement. Between 1981 and 1983, dozens were killed and nearly 10,000 people were interned or arrested. In 1971, 15-year-old Dalia Grybauskaite was photographed doing construction work in Soviet Lithuania. Decades later, she became Lithuania's first female president and the first person in the country's history to win a second consecutive term. The Agoji were elite women soldiers who defended the kingdom of Dahomey in present-day Benin. Trained for brutal close combat, they fought in major wars and fiercely resisted French colonial troops in the late 19th century. The MRK-5 was the only Project 1240 Uragan missile ship ever built, carrying 4 powerful anti-ship missiles. Its enormous hydrofoils lifted the hull above the waves and pushed this 400-ton warship to nearly 111 kilometers per hour. This German Junkers Ju-88 was shot down near Moscow on July 25, 1941, and displayed in central Moscow 5 days later. The reconnaissance aircraft carried the code F6+AK, while its missing crew's fate remains unknown. These British soldiers were prisoners inside Stalag 18A, a German prisoner of war camp in Austria. The photograph came from Corporal Eric Evans, second from the right, who was remarkably allowed to keep his camera in captivity. German prisoners receive extra food at Moscow's Kodinka Field before the Parade of the Vanquished in July 1944. That day, more than 57,000 captured German soldiers were marched through the capital under armed guard. Inside Nuremberg prison, top Nazi leaders awaiting trial were watched around the clock by American guards. Each prisoner was checked through a cell door opening every 30 seconds to prevent suicide. Yet Hermann Göring still killed himself with hidden cyanide hours before his execution. This Victorian rocking bath promised the health benefits of sea bathing by improving circulation. In reality, its violent motion could cause sickness, trap the bather inside, and send filthy bath liquid straight into the mouth. This was the typist's room inside Nuremberg's Palace of Justice during the historic trials in 1946. Publishing the court records consumed an astonishing 5 million sheets of paper, leaving the floor almost completely buried. This 18th century executioner's mask has a painted grin, turning the face of death into a cruel smile. It is now displayed inside the Tower of London. This American P-38 Lightning was pulled from beneath 268 feet of Greenland ice in 1992, 50 years after an emergency landing. Nicknamed Glacier Girl, it was rebuilt with many original parts and returned to the sky in 2002. Serge Lifar holds one of the pistols believed to have been used in Alexander Pushkin's fatal duel in 1837. The pair were 12mm maple dueling pistols made by the famous French gunsmith Lepage. On June 24, 1962, American families lined up in their cars for a 3-hour mass vaccination against polio. Nurses moved from vehicle to vehicle, helping protect entire communities from a disease that could paralyze or kill within days. An overturned Citroën lies in a Paris street during the May 1968 uprising, when students built barricades and fought riot police. The unrest triggered a strike by around 10 million workers, bringing France close to a complete shutdown. In 1955, 14-year-old Emmett Till was brutally murdered in Mississippi after a white woman accused him of offending her. His mother displayed his battered body in an open casket, and after an all-white jury acquitted his killers, they publicly confessed to the murder. In 1931, a German engineer prepared to test this bicycle with 12 rockets mounted above its rear wheel. The homemade machine turned a simple bike into one of the most dangerous experimental vehicles of its time. Babe Paley trusted Truman Capote with her darkest secret, her husband's repeated affairs. In 1975, he exposed her private life in Esquire, so she cut him off forever and died of lung cancer 3 years later. Edward VIII gave up the British throne in 1936 to marry Wallis Simpson, a twice-divorced American. Less than a year later, they met Adolf Hitler in Germany, and wartime intelligence later suspected Edward of seeking his throne back if the Nazis conquered Britain. In December 1969, John Lennon and Yoko Ono placed "Giant War is Over" billboards in 12 major cities around the world. The message was part of their peace campaign against the Vietnam War, and every poster added the words, "If you want it." In the mid-1950s, workers moved this entire house along railroad tracks instead of demolishing it. A truck helped guide the massive building while crews carefully kept it balanced between the rails. These 3 master keys belonged to purser Edward Hull and opened the gold room aboard the steamship Central America. They spent 157 years, nearly 7,200 feet underwater, after the ship of gold sank in an 1857 hurricane. This photo shows the Turkish village at the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, built to resemble a street in Constantinople. Visitors paid to enter a staged Ottoman world filled with cafes, shops, musicians, dancers, and traditional crafts. These Afghan fighters belonged to Hezb-e-Islami Khalis, a powerful Mujahideen group photographed during the Soviet War in 1987. Armed with rifles supplied through Pakistan, the group fought Soviet and Afghan government forces from mountain bases across eastern Afghanistan. In 1958, Cornel Kappa photographed young ballerinas training at Moscow's Bolshoi Ballet School. This rare darkroom guide print preserves his handwritten exposure times and instructions for lightening or darkening specific areas. Robert Wadlow, the tallest person ever reliably measured, stands at 8 feet 11 inches beside his 5 foot 11 inch father. A rare pituitary disorder made him grow throughout his life, and he reached this incredible height before dying at just 22. Donald Trump stands with his parents, Fred and Mary, at the New York Military Academy in 1964. He spent 5 years there and rose to cadet captain during his final year. The Kennedy family gathers at Hyannisport around 1931, with 14-year-old John Kennedy standing at the top left. He was the second of 9 children, decades before becoming the youngest elected president of the United States. When Andre the Giant died in Paris in 1993, no local crematorium could accommodate his enormous body. A custom coffin carried him back to the United States, where he was finally cremated according to his will. British troops captured these female SS guards at Bergen-Belsen in April 1945. Several were later convicted of beating and killing prisoners, and 3, including Irma Gressy, were executed. In 1953, a young Sophia Loren stepped off a train in Italy while still fighting for serious film roles. Within 4 years, she became an international star and later won an Academy Award for a performance entirely in Italian. In the 1920s, a raccoon fur coat became a powerful status symbol among wealthy Ivy League students. These huge coats were so closely tied to campus fashion that owning one instantly marked a man as rich, fashionable, and socially important. Linda Carter strikes a playful pose beside a refrigerator on the Wonder Woman set in the mid-1970s. The former Miss World USA became a television icon when the series premiered in 1975, bringing the famous comic book hero to life. An Italian bersagliere writes a letter during a break in North Africa in 1941 or 1942, still wearing his unit's famous feathered helmet. Letters were a vital link to home for soldiers fighting across the isolated desert. A Korean general poses in traditional armor during the Japanese occupation between 1910 and 1945. His studded coat, helmet, and sword preserve the military style of the Joseon dynasty, which ended when Japan annexed Korea in 1910. On October 9, 1949, Marilyn Monroe posed with 7 fellow models and aspiring actresses for this rare group portrait. Just months earlier, she was still taking small film roles, but within 4 years, she would become one of Hollywood's biggest stars. Inside a Siemens factory in Nuremberg in 1910, workers assembled massive electrical generators by hand. These machines helped power factories, trains, and growing cities as Germany entered the electrical age. On March 18, 1915, Ottoman mines and coastal guns crushed an Allied attempt to force the Dardanelles, sinking 3 battleships. Above this shattered gun, a sign declares, "Allah is with us." In 1946, Joseph McCarthy defeated Senator Robert La Follette, Jr. in Wisconsin's Republican primary before winning the Senate seat. 4 years later, McCarthy became infamous by claiming that communists had infiltrated the United States government. In 1956, these Syrian women trained with rifles in the Civil Army as the Suez Crisis threatened the region. They were preparing to support Egyptian forces against the British, French, and Israeli invasion. In 1961, a violent rainstorm with hail flooded the streets near the railway station in Voronezh. While cars and buses struggled through the water, one barefoot resident simply carried his shoes and walked home. In August 1908, boys worked the night shift inside this Indiana glass factory, surrounded by blazing furnaces, exposed machinery, and scorching pipes. Child workers often labored through the night for tiny wages, risking severe burns, crushed hands, and permanent lung damage. In 1932, workers hung from steel cables in simple wooden chairs while carving George Washington's face into Mount Rushmore with jackhammers and dynamite. Despite the extreme heights and nearly 500,000 tons of blasted rock, no worker died during the 14-year project. The Soviet Union built more than 140 roads, bridges, factories, schools, and other major projects across Afghanistan. This photo shows Sher Khan Port in Kunduz province in 1981, a vital river gateway for Soviet supplies and trade. These Sherpas carried heavy expedition loads through monsoon rain after Albert Egler's Swiss team returned from Everest in 1956. That expedition made the second ascent of Everest and the first ascent of Lhotse, the world's 4th highest mountain. Mexico City, 1934. 2 women look through the wooden windows of a building reportedly located in the city's red light district. The photograph is believed to have been taken on Calle Cuauhtemotzin, an area once notorious for brothels and a nightlife hidden from respectable society. This massive steel bank vault was displayed at the St. Louis World's Fair in 1904. Built by the Manganese Steel Safe Company, its extremely hard metal resisted drills and cutting tools, making it a nightmare for bank robbers. 6 senior Japanese officers read American newspapers inside New Bilibid prison after surrendering in Cebu on August 28, 1945. One of them, Lieutenant General Shinpei Fukue, was later convicted of war crimes and hanged in 1946. A battery of Soviet 152mm ML-20 howitzers waits under the trees near Berlin in April 1945. Each gun could launch a 44-kilogram shell nearly 17 kilometers, smashing German bunkers and fortified buildings before the final assault. In 1942, Canada seized and sold the fishing boats of Japanese Canadians before forcing their families into internment camps. Even after the war, the boats were never returned, leaving their owners robbed of both their freedom and their livelihoods. In July 1904, a passenger train and a freight train collided head-on near Tonopah, throwing both locomotives and several cars into a ditch. Engineer Ward stayed at the throttle until impact and survived his injuries, while passengers and crew escaped by jumping clear. In 1944, Luftwaffe Air Defense Assistant Rudolf Gerbrand and his sister Martha posed beside the landing wheel of a downed British bomber. The enormous tire shows the scale of the aircraft that had crashed near their home. Red Army soldiers ride an IS-2 heavy tank during the brutal battle for Danzig in March 1945. After fierce street fighting, Soviet forces captured the city on March 30th, leaving much of its historic center in ruins. In November 1944, a Filipino volunteer nurse spoke with a badly wounded American soldier inside Palo Cathedral, converted into a hospital after the Allied landings on Leyte. W. Eugene Smith captured the crowded ward for his powerful life photo essay, Hospital on Leyte. In 1955, Volkswagen arranged hundreds of Beetles into its giant logo at the Wolfsburg factory to celebrate producing its 1 millionth car. The milestone came only 10 years after the factory was left badly damaged by the Second World War. Write in the comments which photo you liked the most.